much we just for a project made comic strips on what happened on Bloody Sunday, just kind of beginning to end. So it's just like mine and pictures that I found online, and then captions underneath and stuff.
Yeah, I specifically did Gerald and the nail bombs.
Oh, yes.
I looked into that pretty thoroughly and also did a comic strip.
You ought to let us see them actually, because there's a young woman, now she was chairperson of the trust for a while, her name's Julianne Campbell, and she would be a niece of one of those who died, Jackie Duddy, and Julianne would be his niece. And she's a bit of a poet and a writer, and her brother's very artistic. So they're together doing a comic novel. Is that, have I got the right terminology? A graphic novel, yes, a graphic novel. Now it's in the process at the moment on Bloody Sunday, so we'd be interested to see those.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Any other questions?
One last one. You and John more or less became the face of whatever you would call your process that resulted in the announcement of the Savile report over here in the Guildhall,
Yes,
and then you took to the stage.
Well, that whole day was a little orchestrated. We had a local man who would have been a supporter of the Bloody Sunday campaign for a long time, and we knew the word press was going to be there, and we wanted to do it. So 2 members of each family were allowed to read the report before it was made public. It's all very official, because nobody could see the report until David Cameron spoke about it in Parliament. And we had what they call a lock-in situation. So we went to the Guildhall about 9 o'clock in the morning, and we had to have our phones taken off us and any means of communication taken off. So we were allowed to see the report between 9, and David Cameron was going to speak to the House of Parliament at 3. So we were able to review it. So what we had was, from those family members, we had wanted everybody to say something personal about their brother or father, and everybody chose some lines from the inquiry into what we had written. Now, I can't remember what I said, but I think basically I introduced.
I can almost remember it. Yeah, well.
I introduced myself as the big sister of Kevin McElhenney, and then there was a quote from Savile about he was innocent, and the soldier was not in fear of his life or whatever. I remember that I introduced it with being the big sister, and every family member did the same, and then somebody did the same to represent the wounded, and we also had talked with this guy who was kind of, for want of a better word, theatrical, a bit of theatre. So we talked about having the old report and the new report. Now the old report is like a very superfine thing, and the new report's like this. And somebody talked about, the scales of justice. Well, I am a bit of a junk collector, and I had one of those sets of scales, like this. So they were in my car, and I had a copy of the old report, the Woodgery report, a personal copy, not the museum's copy. So we were going to represent this on the podium out here, but the way the day developed, we were locked in and couldn't get out, and then as soon as we got out, we had to run up these little statements, and I had to actually go and type them, and it was a security guard come with me because I had to take it to a separate room, but I wasn't really allowed to talk to anybody, so there was a security guard with me as I was doing the typing up and preparing for this little event on the stage, and never got to get the scales or anything like that. So the scale bit kind of got lost, but I happened to have the old report with me in my handbag. And after everybody, and it was kind of orchestrated, we were all in a row in a sort of a big half moon, and everybody stepped forward, one from this side, one from this side. We all said our little bit about our individual, in most cases, brothers or fathers. And then we were all finished, and John was making sort of a general statement, because while that was my minute of fame, John and a few, Kay Duddy and Jerry Duddy and a few other people were really the faces of the campaign. Anyways, I had the copy and I took it out and went up to John and said, should I? And it was a spontaneous thing, ripping it apart. So, and you'll see it, there's a copy of the Widgery report in one of our display cases here. It's very flimsy. It's like an old missal, you know, like the old church books, you know, that kind of paper. So it was very easy to rip up. So actually, that picture was, and the other part of it was, on the day I happened to be wearing a very distinctive green jacket. I can't put that jacket on. So that was a very, you know, that picture was everywhere. And people kept walking up to me in the street. People I didn't know said it was a fantastic. Now that was one thing. You know, when I said that people asked about what it was like in Derry when it happened, that it was, I mean, that this didn't happen to families, this happened to Derry. And that findings of that report also happened to Derry. I mean, for about a month afterwards, people would walk up to me in the street and say, wasn't it fantastic? And one of the big things about it was, in terms of weather, you know, we don't get very good weather here, but in terms of weather, it was a truly magnificent day. The sun was shining, everybody was out, the Guildhall Square was full, and it was like a big thing had been lifted. So not only was the event a traumatic day for Derry, but the findings of the Savile report were a fantastic day for Derry, and people talked about it for weeks and weeks, and people, complete strangers, would walk up to me in the street. And in fact, a man came into the museum not long afterwards who said to me, I seen this picture, and he said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, the museum still has a copy of the report. And he said, well, do you? And I said, no. He said, look, turns out he was a unionist from Coleraine. And he said, I actually have one. He says, and he sent it to me. So I have a copy of the report back again, the original report back again now. So,
Jean, you surprised me outside by describing yourself as not a Republican. I'm sure everybody in this room would suspect you're a Republican.
Well, I describe myself as, I have no problem living in Northern Ireland. That's where I was born. It's perhaps not of most people's choosing. I don't know if it would be of my choosing or not when the time came. But I happen to be born in Northern Ireland. We're a part of England, that's where I pay my taxes. I'd like to see a united Ireland, but I don't want to see not even one more life lost to get there. I think eventually we could manage to get there without loss of life, but you know, there's been one or two times since I came back, you know, I was driving in the car one day and I'm going to forget his name now. David Irvine was talking on the radio.
Voices from the grave.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to vote for him. He's from the unionist community, but I really thought he was able to step beyond, and that, of course, then he died quite young, so he died not too long after that. So that was that. Now, about 2 years ago, I was driving home again one day there, and I'm going to forget this guy's name, but he's one of the guys who represents the unionist community in Europe, you know, in the European Parliament. I was driving home one day and I thought, Jesus, that's the reason people took up arms, you know? So I wouldn't describe myself as a Republican, and I have no qualms with a monarchy as such. I'd like to see Ireland have its freedom. I don't care if it's, you know, what type of constitutional government it has. I was annoyed the other day. Now there was a discussion on the BBC about you know, the centenary of 1916, and there was about half a dozen people from different viewpoints talking about it. You know, about people taking up arms, and about how one guy had the view that the British didn't treat those rebels so badly. You know, there was maybe some people were executed, but then after that, you know, Britain's retribution wasn't so bad. But the one thing that really struck me, you know, in the whole conversation, he never once said England had no rights to be here. So from that point of view, you know, but the whole world has been colonialized, and that, so, you know, you have to just move past it and get on with it. Eventually I'd like to see a united Ireland, but either way, you know, you pay your taxes and you hope for jobs.
Thank you. Do you kids have any more questions?
Did your parents raise you as Catholics and then also politically as Republicans?
No, we were raised as Catholic, yes. We were raised as Catholic, I might add, by a mother who never went to church. But, you know, we were made to go to church, but my mother never went to church. My father would have been not a strict church goer, but, you know, more so than my mother. My mother just never went to church at all, but we were raised as Catholic. And I think I view myself as Catholic. You know, I partly raised my children as Catholics, and I had a bit of a falling out with the Catholic Church. My son didn't give me some letters when he was making his confirmation in Canada, and I didn't go to a couple of meetings, so then they wouldn't confirm them. Mm-hmm. And I had a big falling out with the Catholic, with, you know, the particular church about that, you know, that because I didn't go to a meeting, he was being penalised, and I didn't think that was very Christian in that. So I generally don't bother going to church except for weddings and funerals, but I do view myself as Christian, and if I suppose if push came to shove, Catholic, but but we would not have been raised as Republicans. We would have, although I've been doing some family research actually, and it turns out that my grandfather Michael Henney, two of his brothers were in the IRA right around about the 1920s. And my mother's father was also, but I never knew that, and we were never raised as much as I kind of knew about it was, my daddy had two uncles in Dublin who had to get out of the north, and you know, but it was never really talked about, and we were definitely not raised as Republicans. In fact, my daddy would have been quite anti-IRA, so. And even after what happened to Kevin and that, my daddy would have still been quite anti-IRA. So no, we weren't raised as Republicans. I'm not even sure we would have been raised as nationalists. And we lived in a very mixed neighbourhood. A lot of Derry would have been, you know, one neighbourhood or the other. We lived in a mixed neighbourhood, and my mother's Protestant neighbours were wonderful when Kevin died, and it was never a street where we had issues about. My husband and I, on the other hand, grew up in Craigan, which is, you know, just up above the Bogside, and which would be technically considered part of that. And listening to him and I about growing up in Derry, sometimes you think we grew up in a different city completely. He hated cops and stuff like that. Now, where I lived, we had a police station at the top of the next street, and there was a hill. If we had snow, the cops would be out to block off the road and guide us in sleighing, and we'd have called them all by their first names and that, you know, and he hated cops. So, there you go. You know, we just grew up in a different part of the town, really. So.
Anything else? Do you mind a couple of photographs?
I will tell you one thing though. You know about the discrimination by Catholics and Protestants? that is true. My maiden name is Elizabeth Jean McElhinney. I didn't go to grammar school. I went to, from primary school to a technical college, did shorthand typing, office work. One of my very first job interviews was actually to a wine merchant further up this street. And I got an interview, and I went for the interview, and the interview was going not too bad, and he asked me about my primary school. And I went to St. Patrick's. And as soon as I said St. Patrick's, he just turned and he said to me, "We don't hire Catholics."
Wow.
And I wasn't outraged. I wasn't outraged in the sense, but I said to him, "Well, why did you waste my time?" I wasn't timid about it either. I said, "Well, why did you waste my time?" There's apparently a comedian in Belfast who does a whole routine about this kind of stuff. And he said to me, "Your name?" He thought, McElhinney happens to be one of those names that's either Catholic or Protestant, but the Elizabeth would have indicated Protestant. And then where I come from, Phillip Street, he knew was a mixed kind of street. Now, the technical college that I went to, everybody just called it the Tech. But its official name was Londonderry Technical College. And of course, I was applying for a job in an office, so I gave Londonderry. And I actually, to be honest, I had no issues about calling it Derry or Londonderry. So Londonderry Technical College. He thought I was a Protestant. And the job interview, although he answered my questions about why did he waste my time, didn't change his mind in any way. The interview was over. So, the discrimination was real, absolutely real. I knew I would never really have got a job in the civil service, or even a lot of the banks. I wouldn't have got a job in a lot of the banks, but there you go.
Is that simmered down like quite a bit since then?
I'm going to say yes, officially. And it's legal now. If you advertise for a job now, you have to advertise like we have Catholic and Protestant papers. They don't say that, but everybody knows. So you have to advertise if it's a public job. For example, if we were hiring someone here, because we have some public funding, we would have to advertise in a paper that for both communities. So the advertisement would have to be there, and there's equal opportunities in that. So there's nothing blatant anymore. And in a lot of cases it doesn't matter, like the civil service and things like that, that's all gone now. But kind of does happen, and I have to say, it happens more on the Catholic side than it does on the
Now, could you take somebody to court about that?
Well, you can if you have proof. You know what I mean? If you really feel it is discrimination, you can, yes.
And is there any justice in the court system?
I would have faith in the court system. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on with the court system now in what they call legacy issues about the past.
Yeah, we've heard about that.
And it's hard to know. There's two particular cases in Derry lately that people have been very disappointed. There's one particular one, there's a picture out there of a little guy called Daniel Hegarty. He happens to be looking down on the body of Michael Kelly. It's one of the photographs that we have out here. And he was shot in Operation Motorman in July, August of the same year. And his family have just got word there was a murder investigation, but the prosecution service are not going to take it to court. They're not convinced. I hope I give you the right thing on this now. The public prosecution service do not believe they'll get a conviction. They believe the soldier will probably be able to persuade the court that he felt under threat. They agree there was no threat, but what the soldier believed. So that's Daniel Hegarty case, if any of you want to take a look at any of what has come out from the prosecution service lately on it. And there's been a few of those cases. You know, there has been investigations. The prosecution service are convinced, well, it's not them to judge, but they feel there is a case to answer, but they also feel that there's a case to be answered. In this case, that while they say the soldier was not under threat and there was no evidence that the soldier was under threat, what the soldier believes he was under, if the soldier believed he was under threat. So, and I think that actually might be quite relevant for us when the time comes.
Thank you.
So,
Jane, thank you.
now, do you just want to see this slideshow?